starting the recording now, and we are going to launch into the first question that you'll have received on your agenda. And I'm actually going to release this as a word cloud to begin with. If you want to fill in the word cloud, you can. If you don't want to, then that's okay too. You can speak. It's just a nice little thing to do. So the first sort of item for discussion that I wanted to bring today was what has worked well in your journey to improving the health, safety and well-being in your organisation. So yeah, as I said, feel free to fill in the poll or the word cloud, or if not, you can just speak, or you can pop some comments in the chat, whichever you'd prefer. Focus groups. Brilliant. Excellent. So we've got training opportunities, ideas, senior management team, communication, focus group, members of staff. It'd be great to actually the members of staff one. It'd be great to explore that a little bit more. Whoever mentioned that, if they're keen to speak.
Yeah, that was me. I actually typed a few more words and it's just kind of remember the first three words. Right. So that's why it probably doesn't make sense. But it basically went on the line of communication and listening to what people want and listening to their ideas. It's really important to, yeah, obviously take on board what they want.
Mm.
So yeah, I think now that we've captured some thoughts, maybe if we can just expand a little bit on those. I haven't actually got this in front of me, Joe, so I might rely on you just to raise a couple of points and then we'll kind of cascade into different conversation. But just on that one that we've just spoken about quickly about employee voice. So obviously employee voice is one of the components of the 7 domains of well-being. And so, fostering a culture of well-being within an organization does rely heavily on capturing the employee voice. But what I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about is whether or not within your organizations, bearing in mind we've got different sizes and different reach within your organization, whether or not the employee voice can truly be captured and things can actually change as a result of the employee voice. And the reason why I ask that question is because when you look at companies like Google and Facebook, that often put forward as being great places to work, they will have all kinds of things that are in place as employee benefits, some that just probably wouldn't work in the UK and obviously cost a lot of money. Things like you can get your oil changed for free on campus. They have gourmet chefs on campus as well for dishing out free food all day. You can get a haircut for free. But then when the staff get asked, is there anything else you would like? They get all kinds of crazy suggestions, like one employee actually suggested free drones for every employee. One person requested a full-size cricket pitch on campus. And so I'm interested to hear a little bit more about how the employee voice lands within your organization and whether or not that then presents challenges that you also face.
Yeah, I feel like what we have started doing is listening to the voice of the customer. And obviously, if the idea is crazy, like, a brand new cricket pitch or something like that, we'll obviously say no. But like, if there's something else we can do. So, for example, we've had an idea at the moment where we're looking at creating a walk path around the whole of the site, which is good for well-being. And, you can do it on your lunch break. Or even if you just wanted to walk for a 10-minute break or whatever, and to get involved with nature as well. There's some lovely trees and nice places around the site. But with going back to listening to the voice of the individuals, it's also encouraging people to be part of like the wellbeing teams or the mental health teams. And yeah, so we do try to listen to everybody, but within limits.
That's interesting. Thank you, Catherine. And Linda and Emma, have you had any kind of experience or exposure to the employee voice and either the positive or maybe negative impact it might have on creating the plan afterwards?
Yeah, yeah, I was smiling when you were saying about Google, because we're about as far from that as you could possibly get. You know, we're a charity, so we're not you know, earning any revenue to plough into that sort of thing. So we're dependent on funds coming into us and managing to squeeze every last penny out of every last grant that we get. So there's not a lot left for that type of investment. But I don't actually think that you need that to have a well-being culture in an organisation. I personally think it's more to do with the people that are in it, and do you feel supported, welcomed, valued, listened to, etc. And in some ways, well, in a lot of ways, that's a lot harder to do than throwing money at it and creating all kinds of amazing, supposedly, benefits. Because you could have all of that, and you could have an absolutely horrendous senior management team who, you know, have ridiculous expectations around workload, which I suspect is true of some of these organisations. So for us, I think we've gone from not having much focus on well-being at all, but having quite a supportive environment, to really thinking through ways that we can support employees. Everything from, you know, really cheap little things like a personal alarm for everybody to carry, because we do home visits, so we need to make sure that our people are safe. So small things like that, to looking at lone working systems that can keep us safe on a more robust way, to what can we provide at supervision, or we have a buddying system that people can link up if they want to chat things through informally, if they don't feel ready or able to talk to their line manager, if they're under stress. We've set up a health and well-being group, which I sort of lead on. And that for me has been the biggest thing in this journey, because we were expecting no buy-in to that, and we now have 4 or 5 of us on that wellbeing team who are all passionate about well-being of the staff as well as the people that we support. Flip side of that has been, we have certain members of staff who are not in the least bit interested. Now, if you work in a big organisation and you've got 10,000 employees, and you've got, you know, a small percentage of that couldn't care less about their own well-being or anybody else's, they kind of get lost in the crowd and their voices aren't maybe heard so much. But when it's maybe 5 people out of 18, you could potentially have a problem, because we all know each other really well. You know, I know every single employee I know in our organisation, and they all know me. So if somebody becomes disgruntled, and this is what we're finding now, is because I don't like to use the word push the wellbeing agenda, because I just think, personally, I don't understand why anybody wouldn't be interested in their own well-being and their own personal safety. But we do have members of staff who aren't, and they just think, I'm here to do my job, leave me alone. I don't care about mindfulness, going for a walk. I don't want a personal alarm. I don't want to use a lone working system. Leave me alone. Let me do my job. Not interested. And if they're quite vocal about it, and they are becoming quite vocal about it, we can see a problem brewing in getting the balance right in a small organisation between creating that supportive working environment and having it embedded in our organisational strategy, and really, you know, annoying people. Don't want to turn the air blue, but yeah, so that's where we're at. We know we're doing, we've come a long way since we started on this sort of 18 months ago. But we want to get the balance right, because we don't want to alienate potentially a third of our staff by asking them to, you know, think about their own well-being and how they can care about the well-being of others. If they just don't care, what do you do? And that's where we're sort of at with it just now. You know, so I'd welcome any ideas on that. Do we pull back, or do we keep doing what we're doing?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So just the concept of engagement as a whole can be a completely separate, you know, roundtable, actually.
Yeah.
Something that we could even consider, you know, for future specifically talking about engagement as a conversation. But if you look at the HSE recommendations for line manager support, they actually consider recruitment to be one of the facets of establishing a wellbeing culture within an organization, i.e., you know, at the very stage of recruiting people to work for the organization, establishing what their views are and their thoughts on well-being are to determine whether or not they would actually fit within that wider culture, or what the ambition of the culture is for that organization, which obviously you can't do if you've already got the people in the organization. And that's not a fix to that. But obviously well-being by its very nature is supposed to be proactive, i.e. things put in place before then problems occur.
Exactly.
However, well-being is also on a continuum, where if you have people that are at the more, let's say, combative end of the continuum of engagement in well-being, then you need to be more reactive to that rather than proactive to those types of people. And even if it is just establishing what their social values are, that can help to, you know, create a better understanding as to where the wider organization sits on that bell-shaped curve. And if you have the majority of your organization engaged in well-being, that's a good space. And then you're going to have the outliers of people that are overly engaged and people that are under-engaged. And you won't be able to get everybody with the same level of engagement. But if you've got the majority, that's a good place to be. One thing I would say, though, is that what we found when looking at things like engagement, that any kind of negative views or negative bias can potentially spread. You know, so it's something, you know, to actually be mindful of as something that can impact the progress of a well-being strategy. And I'm sure you've probably picked this up from the documents that have been shared in the past, but any successful strategy ideally should consider things that can go wrong in order for you to then prepare for what to do when it goes wrong. And that kind of real substandard of quality of engagement, that's something that by itself we you know, could have an open conversation about.
Yeah, I think when we come to do our second employee wellbeing survey, which we will be doing shortly, I suspect we'll have a much lower level of engagement than we did. I think we had everybody bar one, or maybe we might have even had 100% the first time round. I think there'll probably be lower engagement for a number of reasons, but definitely what I've just said. So we are considering other ways, maybe a softer approach and ways of tackling that. But it's very interesting watching the dynamics of the team evolve around the subject of well-being.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's also when you talk about well-being, still now, you know, even at this present time, when we talk about well-being, people will instinctively think, oh yeah, healthy eating and exercise. You know, they don't consider that actually well-being genuinely considers what are the person's, as an individual, what are their desires, what are the things that they personally value, and are there things that we can explore as an organization that will make them feel better about working with this organization. And because well-being typically will be related to healthy eating and, you know, exercise, that then comes with its own emotions. So if I was a person that knew that I drank too much alcohol, I probably wouldn't want to talk about that in an open forum conversation. I'd feel maybe a little bit of guilt, maybe a bit of embarrassment, because I recognize that, you know, consuming too much alcohol is a social taboo. Likewise, if I was morbidly obese, then I might not want to enter into conversations talking about weight management, regardless of whether or not I think or know that it's beneficial for me. So well-being is quite emotive. But if we are able to, over a long duration of time, spread the awareness that actually well-being is not just about the kind of classic exercise and eating well, it's a lot to do with employee voice. It's a lot to do with line management. It's a lot to do with just the experience of working within an organization. And we start to expand it. That's when we start to see that people will engage better, because they start to realize where this actually benefits them as an individual.
Yeah, it's more meaningful to them personally.
Exactly. And meaningful is probably a key word that I would take away is, you know, whenever you're looking at anything to do with well-being, if meaningful is the objective, then it will be more, it will have a better outcome.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark.
So Emma, from your perspective as well, in terms of, you know, capturing things like employee voice and the kind of challenges that can bring up, is that something you yourself have experienced as well when kind of pulling things together?
Yes. Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, we had Joe did the survey, you know, of the staff, And it was quite funny getting the results from that, because I remember being really indignant about some of the responses and saying, how can they say we don't do whatever it was when we jolly well do? So that was quite interesting. But I think from my point of view, internally within our own organisation, I find the changes have happened so quickly that I can't keep up with the pace of change in terms of documenting it, you know, sort of what we're doing, and where we are now in comparison to where we were even a couple of years ago is huge. Now we're a small organisation. There's only 30 of us in total. But what I tend to find is within those 30, people naturally sort of they reduce down into groups. So, and usually those groups will be up to about 10 people, and whether that's because they're, you know, they join together at lunchtime or whatever, or whether they work together. So actually, when you look at the individual groups, it's much more manageable. Also, I'm quite a chatty person normally. So when I go into the office, when we're actually in the office, which has been absolutely marvellous, I threatened to hug people at first. I was like, oh, I'm seeing people, how great is this? So they all know that I am like that. And I will collar people. I will just go straight up to them and saying, you know, oh, you look great, you've had your hair done, or you don't look great, do you want to have a chat? And kind of, that's just how I am. So, and by doing that and really getting the senior management team and people who are, even if they're not officially, but seeing that they are leaders of whatever group, by getting them on board and saying, look, this is really important. How is your team doing? And some people, we have lost people about it. I think it was about 3 altogether who were quite uppity, shall we call it that, because we're being recorded, and I don't, you know, but really very rude indeed. But to be honest, I feel quite strongly that I don't want to employ people who have that different view to me. You know, I really don't, because we work hard, we really work hard, we work long hours. I don't want to spend that time with people I don't like. I want to spend that time with people that I have common interests with. And I don't mean, you know, we're all the same age. We're not. We've got a real range of ages in the company, and we've got a real range of outlooks. Some people are incredibly sporty, and whenever they take holidays, they're going off running and cycling. I couldn't run for a bus. I've no desire to do so either. Thank you very much. So, but that, just recognizing that difference. Some people are not drinkers. They don't touch alcohol. Others have a considerable quantity of alcohol outside of the workplace. And I think for me, it was about celebrating those differences and making it very, very clear that the door is open. And if people want to chat, then they don't have to talk to me, particularly, I can't, yes, we had a couple of people who they just don't like me. I am too bubbly. I'm not serious enough for them. They can't cope with me, and that's fine. So they were really uncomfortable with this whole Emma talking to Emma about well-being. So I said, well, fine, go and talk to somebody else then. And then I allocated either their line manager or somebody else that was of a more similar character to them to say, right, will you please have a talk with so-and-so, because I don't think that they're doing okay. And that has worked wonders. It really, really has.
That's interesting.
And I think I can say with absolute certainty that I genuinely like every single one of my staff, which is a lovely, lovely place to be. I mean, we do clash on times, of course we do, because that's human nature. But I think I feel that they all know that somebody said earlier, right, supporting them. It's not about telling people what to do. It's about enabling them and saying, right, what do you need from me to enable you to do your job better? And that doesn't mean longer hours. It just, we've got a real range. Everybody knows about flexible working. Some people have increased hours. Some people have decreased hours. Some people take, 90 minutes out at pick-up time so they can pick up kids and then make up the hours later that evening. And that's fine. I don't care when they're doing the work. All I need is the work to be done. So that's their responsibility then. And I've really seen them thrive under that, actually, and feeling that they're more engaged. So it's been good. Overall, it's been good, but there have been some very, very steep hills to conquer.
That's really interesting. There's a number of points there that I would like to dissect. I'm just thinking that we do have other things on the agenda to run through, but there's a couple of things I want to take away from that, Emma. In that you mentioned that there's been a fair amount of change in a short period of time, and it's difficult to actually keep up with whatever the latest is and whatever's happening at the moment. And actually, when you look at some of the original research that was done on how humans react to change, it's actually found that when change occurs over a 2-year period, if we don't have things in place to be able to have the resilience to adapt to those changes, whether they're positive or negative, it can actually dramatically decrease your immunity and therefore increase your susceptibility to becoming unwell. And when I'm saying change, I'm talking about life events. So things like getting married, getting divorced, going on holiday, all these kind of life change events that take place can accumulate over a period of time. And basically, there was some research that was put together where they assigned a value to each of these life change events and determined that over a 2-year period, if you've experienced these certain number of life change events, that then you would have a decreased immunity if you don't have things in place to build your resilience. So obviously, talking about well-being, a lot of the time we talk about mental health in the workplace, and I think actually, Emma, it was even yourself that mentioned that you've done some work with Mates in Mind in the past. So yeah, mental health in the workplace is definitely something that can help to protect us from the need to adapt to change in the workplace. But if people aren't, ready to talk about mental health or, able to feel confident talking about it with certain personnel, that can potentially be a blocker to them and having the resilience in place to be able to react to change. And one of the kind of unique opportunities, but also challenges of well-being is that the need will always change. So even when you have something set up, in the next 12 months to 3 years, in 3 years' time, the need of the workforce will be different. And so things will need to adapt, and you might need to drop things that you currently have in place that perceive to be working and introduce other things in the future because the workforce is transient and obviously their needs will change over time. Now, before I start continuing going down that rabbit warren, Joe, do you want to move on to the next question so we can capture some other content?
Yes, absolutely. So the next one, I know obviously Linda's touched on this already, but the next one is, what are the challenges that you faced in improving health, safety and well-being in your organisation? Again, feel free to pop it on the word cloud, or if you'd prefer to speak, you can just start speaking. That is absolutely fine.
I think cynicism has been a big one for us, with staff who perhaps have been with you a long time, and then you start talking about change and they're like, yeah, nothing changes, it's always the same. And you're like, no, it really is different. The world is a different place. But I think one of the benefits that we found actually is COVID, because that was such a rapid change. I mean, literally everybody got sent home, didn't they, on the same day? So people that struggled with change couldn't hide behind it. They couldn't say, no, we don't want to do this, because all of a sudden everybody had to learn how to use Teams or Zoom or whatever it is. So it's been a real force of change, which has been, that is in itself really challenging, really challenging.
Thank you, Emma. That's yeah, really interesting, isn't it? How, over the last 2 years we've had to navigate change in a way that we've never had to before and never will do again in our lifetimes.
I sincerely hope not.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to give up.
Yeah, we hope.
Again. That's it. I'm just going to switch off and go sit in the garden and drink wine.
So this is interesting. Just as an observation, I think I can see the results of the poll this time. For some reason, I couldn't on the last one. But it actually looks as though there's less that's been submitted in the way of challenges that have been faced, which is actually really interesting, because as human beings, we do have a negative bias. So we are generally better at raising the things that haven't gone well. But it might be just as a collective group, because of the area of interest that we all have, that we see the positives and we see things that work well. One of the ones I'd like to explore a little bit more is around workload. So, you know, I'm not going to suggest that within our team and within our organisation that we've nailed the perfect concept of having the right amount of workload. But what we're currently exploring within our own team, and something that we'll look to explore then as a wider organisation, is the perception of workload. So whoever mentioned workload, how does that come up within the organisation as being a problem? And are there any ways that have been looked at to try and remedy the concept of workload within your workforce? So Linda, I think you raised your hand there.
Yeah, it was. It's been an issue for a while. We have to be reactive to the number of referrals that are coming in. And when we first all got sent home to work from home for COVID, our referrals just absolutely dropped to virtually zero. So we had to then start proactively engaging with all the carers on our database, phoning them saying, are you okay? How's things going? But lately, as we've come out of COVID, the referrals have just gone boom. And we have recruited, I also put in about staff capacity, because we had several members of staff who dropped their hours because of personal circumstances. We had somebody retired. I was off sick for quite a long time with unexpected physical illness. So a number of factors. So reduced staff capacity coincided with increased referrals, therefore increased workload. And when we did recruit successfully two members of staff and support workers and admin, didn't appear to make any difference, and it still hasn't, because the referrals are just going up and up and up and up. So our waiting list is going up and up and up, which can create anxiety when you've got a team of really committed, dedicated caseworkers who want to support all these carers who are coming out of COVID. They still don't have the services they need for their loved ones. Far from it. The council has used COVID as I see it, as an excuse to take services away and not reinstate them. So we've got people that are really at breaking point. So what we're finding is, not only do we have more referrals, but they're from more serious situations. It's not people just engaging with us or want to apply for a grant or want a bit of emotional, you know, like light touch support. It's really heavy going stuff. A lot of bereavement support. So that's a lot for a small team to deal with. And then you start trying to throw personal safety and well-being and health, and I can understand why some are really resistant to that, because it's just like, well, I need to spend 100% of my working week supporting these carers who have just had a horrendous experience. What we keep saying is, but if you don't look after yourself as well, you're going to burn out. You're going to get compassion fatigue, which is definitely a thing.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Just training on that early COVID, and I get that.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, so it's just there's been such a change in the landscape of the support that we provide. And although, you know, people say, oh, we're coming out of COVID, we don't feel as if we are, because we're still dealing with the after effects of it, and so are the people we support. So workload has become quite a topic, and I've done mental health first aid. I'm a mental health first aider, and you know, I'm quite visible within the team, and I'll say, you know, if you want to approach me informally, please do. So I'm getting a trickle now of people saying, you know, just they're not kind of coming right out. So we addressed it in the last health and wellbeing group, and it's clear that it is an emerging issue, that people are feeling burnt out. So we went home in tears after the team meeting this week. People are, you know, looking at other job opportunities, and it really does come down to workload. So you can do all the mindfulness and what have you in the world, but if staff are feeling stressed because of workload, no amount of mindfulness is going to make any difference. I do have a bit of a bugbear about that.
Yeah.
Resilience is not about doing breathing exercises once a day. It can be an organisational workload issue, and it needs to be addressed at senior management level. So I'm not quite sure where we're going to go with that, because we've just flagged it as an issue to management, and I want more opportunities for us to discuss it openly. But I think a lot of people will be very reluctant to discuss it openly.
Yeah.
So it's finding the right forum to do it, and not in a heavy-handed way. So that's where it's from with the workload thing.
Yeah. So again, when talking about workload, it's probably something that we could even have another roundtable about specifically.
Yeah.
Because there's multiple components to this. There are, the physical work that literally needs to be done. If it didn't get done, then we're in a bad situation as an organization. Versus the perception of that workload. And then in between that, you've got processes that are required in order to get the job done. So it's really difficult to determine exactly what needs to be addressed. Is it the workload itself? Is it the perception? Is it the processes that people are following in order to get the work done? But one way in which that can be kind of pulled out is by doing a stress risk assessment with the whole organization. So I'm not sure whether or not you've gone down that route in the past, and maybe you've used that to your advantage.
Yeah. We're just, again, at the moment, we're just in the middle of, well, not me personally writing it, but my line manager writing a stress management policy, and I'm just about to give her staff feedback on this, the risk assessment element of that, and does it, is it robust enough? So again, that's something that we are actively looking at. We're not quite there yet, and it definitely has come up as an issue as a result of consulting with staff about that.
And so again, you're showing a level of maturity there with the approach, because again, traditionally speaking, people will find out, oh, our organization is stressed. It's because of their workload. We'll give them mindfulness. We'll give them an EAP provision as well, so that when they break, they can just get some support from a counsellor.
Yeah.
Whereas if we're looking at well-being in the way that we want to look at well-being, which is let's address the core issue so that it is then proactive addressing of the issues, then we'll start to be able to then develop things. And it might be, obviously this is overly simplistic, but it might be that every one of the workforce has to use a certain IT platform that every day they waste 15 minutes entering in data that would be so much easier if it was all automated, just as an example. And finding out that something as simple as that could then address the workload. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that is the case in your organization, Linda, but addressing a process rather than the person in this situation might be what is needed in order to see an improvement in that area. And also, if it isn't a process, if it isn't the people's perception, but it actually turns out to be the physical workload, that then can result in a business case required in order to increase the workforce to be able to deal with the workload that's in place. So this is where well-being is not
easy when you're in a charity, because you can't put a business case for funding that you don't have.
Yes.
So it's a whole different issue. But funnily enough, you should say about processes, we have just recently had a new process brought in, which has just caused absolute mayhem.
Yeah. So new process and change combined, affecting resilience.
And change, in my view, not dealt with very well. We had a so-called open forum for discussion at our team meeting this week about it, and it wasn't an open forum for discussion. It was telling you this is how it's done and you will do it that way. Hence people leaving in tears and getting very angry, but not being willing to talk about it openly. So that's it's an issue with very small charities. We only have 2 senior management and then the board.
Yeah.
So, if those 2 senior managers are saying this is the way you need to do it, where do you go with that? Because they're the people that you talk to about your workload issues. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, no amount of mindfulness and training is going to make a difference to that if it's the process that's contributing to it, which it most definitely is. So it's a tricky one, very tricky one.
Yeah, it is a tricky one. So just to let you know, we've one of the things that we find is that in some organizations, the awareness and the engagement at a director level is something that can actually cause stress for the organization. So we've actually put together a wellbeing, basically wellbeing for directors course in order to be able to have the right type of conversation with the right type of people to basically bridge the gap between awareness of action and the impact that it has on the workforce. So we're just in the process of piloting that at the moment. So maybe that's something that we could look at down the line.
Yeah.
Just conscious of time, I know that we've got one more question on our agenda. Before we move on to that question, Emma and Catherine, was there anything that you wanted to expand upon in terms of your experience with the challenges that you faced, with putting together a wellbeing program?
Yeah, I mean, mine was very similar to Linda's. That's why I didn't say or write anything. It's workload. So we've got all of the ideas in our team meetings. It's just when it actually comes to pinpointing somebody or a team within the group to actually get down and action what's been discussed. So it is workload and staff capacity.
Yeah. I'd absolutely agree with that. Again, like Catherine, that's sort of why I didn't really say much, because I think Linda covered all of the points that I would agree with. Yeah.
Well, that's good, because it means that everything we've just spoken about is directly relevant to the challenges that you raised, which is also good, because it just conscious of time. If we move on to the last question, Joe, that you were going to position. Looks like you're still on mute, Joe.
Sorry, I muted myself, my microphone. The last one is just about Mental Health Awareness Week, because it's quite a big one last week. So it's just a little exploration of, did you do anything for Mental Health Awareness Week? Yeah, and if so, it'd be great to explore what you did, how you did it, whether it's successful or not, sort of in the closing discussion, really.
I don't mind kicking it off. I've submitted yes. It was obviously Mental Health Awareness Week last week, and as part of that, what we did was we arranged a couple of sessions, one on the Monday, one on the Friday, of actually managing stress and anxiety and how to cope with it. So they were both an hour session long sessions, which were interactive with the team across both sites, and it was really good. We got a lot of positive feedback from that.
Brilliant, excellent, well done. Great. Anyone else?
And one of my colleagues has just been trained as a mindfulness practitioner. She's one of our mental health care support workers. So she did a taster session for, not for staff, but for carers that we engage with. I'm not sure how many people she had attending, but I'm sure it was well attended, because it is something that we do find has worked well for a lot of our clients. So that's what we did.
Excellent, brilliant.
Yeah,
ours got postponed, I'm afraid, because I'm the one that does everything, and of course, because I had COVID, that was that. But I'll tell you what we are doing, which I am so excited about. We're having a team get together, and they're going axe throwing.
Nice.
Which I think sounds amazing. So they're all off going off somewhere in Glasgow, which I think would be, it's quite a good way of getting rid of your stresses, I think, walloping an axe into a board. So that's sort of, but I tend to talk about, I really have a thing about mental health, so I talk about it all the time. So I don't think that necessarily within our organisation we need a week anymore, because it is literally talked about all the time. So that I kind of felt quite good about that, okay, we didn't have our big event, that's been postponed, but at least it's not cancelled, it's just postponed.
That is excellent. It's one of my big bugbears about these awareness weeks and even months. We've got Mental Health Awareness Week. Let's talk about mental health in this week. Well, what about the other 51
what about the other
weeks
51 weeks of the year? So it's, if you can, I think sometimes if people can use Mental Health Awareness Week to start talking about it, but then you have to keep it going. You have to, otherwise there is no point. Don't waste your energy. So
Emma, are you slightly concerned that the employees that you said don't like you are going to take a picture of your face on the export?
I wouldn't be at all surprised to find that's what happens for a couple of them, to be honest, Marcus.
Well, I hope that they don't. Yeah, it's great. You know, some of the things that you've all spoken about there are all slightly different, but all are actually going to have a direct impact on, you know, the ability to talk about these things within the workplace. And I know for me personally, I grew up in an area and kind of early life experiences where talking about my mental health or showing any form of emotion just was not on the agenda. And it wasn't really until I actually started to learn the science behind stress, resilience and mindfulness that I myself was able to fully accept and engage with this as a conversation point. And what I would say is that the more exposure people get to these conversations and the more they see their colleagues and their friends talking about it and experiencing things, it definitely has a positive impact. And I can say that from my own personal experience as well. So it's really, really great to hear.
Brilliant. Thank you, Marcus. So I'm conscious we've sort of got 3.5 minutes left. So just thought it'd be useful in the sort of closing moments to just ask you if there's anything else that you were, you know, desperately, urgently wanting to cover. If not, I'll sort of wrap up and sort of explain next steps, if you like. Is there anything anyone wanted to cover sort of before we finish up?
No, I think you've covered it for me.
I was asked to ask a couple of questions, but it might be better to do that perhaps when I know we've got a meetup, Joe, in a few weeks' time, because we had some questions around, you know, like specific things around the survey, the content of the survey, in the resource hub, and but just for now, would just be interested to know, are there other small charities that are on the Being Well Together program? Because we do feel, but you know, being quite honest here, that the content of the survey and some of the resources are more suited to larger corporations and not quite the right fit for a small charity of our nature. So we were wondering, are there other charities involved in the programme? And if so, could we maybe come together and form our own sort of network? I mean, I've no idea of the numbers or, you know, the type of organisations that are engaged with the programme, but it was just something my boss asked me to ask today.
Brilliant, thank you, Linda. Yeah, so in fact, for our because we have membership for British Safety Council Health and Safety membership, which is separate to the Being Well Together programme. We do have separate interest groups where people from certain sectors meet to have those discussions. So perhaps that's something that we could look at setting up in the near future. With regards to your other questions, I think they're probably best if we go through those when we meet up in a few weeks, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
But also just to kind of continue on with that, so I've obviously been brought into the organisation as an SME, and you know, something that we really want to do is continue to grow the amount of resources that we have available, because as we know, the need will change as time goes on, and as our customer base increases. So we really like to capture your requirements, and then we can start to put that into a development plan.
That's fine. Well, we'll talk to Jo about it when we meet with her in a couple of weeks' time, and I'm sure that'll filter back to you, Marcus.
Lovely.
Perfect. I know, Emma, you mentioned that you're good. Catherine, is there anything else you wanted to raise?
No, thank you though, Jo. No, you covered a lot today, so yeah, really interesting. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, thank you all for attending. What I will do is in the next sort of few minutes, I will send you out an email just sort of with thank you, next steps. There's also a link to a super quick survey that I'd be really, really grateful if you could fill in. It's just basically a feedback, just so we know sort of what you thought of this event and how we can improve it for next time. And if there's anything that came up today that, because there's a sort of maybe three times that Marcus is like, oh, we could probably have a roundtable on that. If there's anything today that particularly resonated with you, thinking I'd really like to explore that in another roundtable, then feel free to pop it in one of the comments boxes as well. Other than that, I think that's goodbye from us, and I will I'm sort of meeting with you all separately in a few weeks' time as well.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
Thank you, everyone. Nice
Thanks,
to meet you.
everyone.
Thanks for coming on your day off, Linda.
Yes.
Oh,
Bye.
I'm rushing to the school to pick up my granddaughter now, so I've squeezed you